friends. Today I want to talk to you about advanced woven picots. This is a tutorial that's a bit different because I'm not actually going to show you how to do a woven picot because the instructions we have in our basic woven picot tutorial are perfect. But I want to talk about some tips and tricks of what you can do to do more advanced woven picots. So this for me began the first time that I wanted to do a woven picot and I didn't want it to be pointed. So this is the first ones that I did. And some of these you can see turned out more pointed and some of them turned out more round. And I was still trying to figure out how to make them all be more consistent and more round. And so when I put them on the Ocean Reef quilt, I started to use pins to hold those outside edges apart, and I just tucked 2 pins in a little bit to kind of pull them apart as I wrapped, and that kept them consistent. My next one was trying to get them to be all the same size. That was the next frustration that I had. And so even when I would measure them, so my pin went in at exactly the same distance, I still ended up with some that were long and some that were short, and I ended up cutting out 2 or 3 of them, the ones that were the worst. And so I was looking for a way to make them more consistent. The thing that I came up with for making them more consistent is called, I call it Woven Picot Guide. It has more benefits than just being able to make them more consistent. When you do a woven picot, when you're pulling it up, when you're done, when you pull it up, sometimes your threads will catch some of the fibers in the wool. And so the first time that this became a problem for me was working on a project where instead of it going over wool, because you can kind of pull it up anyway and you'll get a few fibers, but it'll be okay. But I was doing it over top of threads on this little strawberry pincushion. And so because it had to go over threads, I was looking for a solution to it. And that's why I first started with the paper strips. So at first I was just putting a paper strip underneath. And that's what you will find in my kits that have picots in them, have picot guides in them. They are designed for you to cut it out on the dashed lines like this, and then put it in place. And let me show you how that works. We're going to pretend for a moment that we want to put a picot right up here on this side of the coneflower. And so how that would work, I have a needle with some thread in it. No, the color doesn't match, and no, I'm not really going to put a picot up here. But we will come out right here, and the picot guide will then tuck in right there, and I'm going to go down. Notice that the picot guide has us keeping those together right there. So that'll tell me so that my size can be consistent. Now, another thing that I learned early on is that, this is my messy, these are some of my first woven picot stitches right here. And can you see how they have a loop on the top of them? At the end of the video, I'll talk about a tip for getting rid of those loops. But one of the problems with those loops is created by the size of the pin or needle that you use. And so I like these pins. They're from Clover. They're glass head pins, and they are green and amber always. They are expensive. They're not cheap as far as pins go, but they're very thin, and that helps you to avoid that ball at the top, or the little loop at the top. They aren't very secure, or they aren't very strong. So they work perfect for this, but when my son sits down in my stitching chair and shoves all of the pins all the way down in the armrest, they end up bending half of them. So buy a package with a friend because you don't need near that many for it. You can reuse them over and over. Okay, and then your pin will go in at the top right here. Now, does it matter where that comes out? In most of the videos, it shows that you want that to come out down here, but it doesn't matter. Just get it in enough to secure it. Okay. And then we'll place this right here, and we'll take our loop in between and go up and around that. Okay, so this is to get the first one in place. Do not need that stray white thread. But now you'll see that when I pull this into place, I am not going to end up with a loop that is that shape because I need it to stay out here. And that's where the pins come in handy. So you can put as many pins across here as you need to. I think I usually put For this one, I might put 5. I might put, I can't remember if I put 5 or if I put 3, but I'll show you a picture of it and then we'll know for sure. Because this one narrows back in, I don't put the pin all the way straight down. I just put it in from the fattest part to the fattest part right here. Okay, I need to hook this one. Your outside one should go, your outside wrap should go all the way around the outside of the pins. My thread is too short, so I don't know if I can get it to do that, but there we go. Okay, so it'll go outside the pins. Now, if that doesn't get these guys far enough out, you can add another layer of pins in there. Line up your picot guide where you want it, and then you just go ahead and stitch the picot stitch. Those pins will help you make whatever shape you want. There is an Instagram account. It's That Embroidery Girl, and I'll show you some of the pictures right now of the different shapes that she makes with pins. She makes all sorts of shapes. If you put your pins strategically and you use those pins to make, to warp your little woven thing and go ahead and weave it, you can make whatever shape you want. So I like these because they will make your loops consistent here. I don't know if you can see this. This is before I started. See how this one is longer and fatter? That's before, these were the first few that I made just in practice for it. In fact, this whole thing is my practice sheet for it. So the other thing that you will notice on these picots for this particular project is that when it gets down here to the bottom, I need it to go skinnier, and it's too wide to have 5 stitches down there. So when I hit this point right here, I put, let's see, this one's a good one to show it. When I hit this point right here, I switched, and instead of separately doing these 3 center ones, I went ahead and just looped those together. So I would go over all 3 of them every time as if it were just one, and that allowed me to cinch it in tight right there. Let me see if I can raise it up so you can see it right here where I switched from going over 5 to just going over 3 and put all 3 of those in the middle. That will be how you cinch those down at the end. Okay, other things, tacking it down where you want it in the end. This is an example of that right here. You can see that I did these little woven picots, and then I didn't want them to go kind of straight because that wasn't the direction that they needed to be around the head. So I just tacked down the end where I wanted it. Here are other examples of where these have been tacked. This one is a leaf that has been done, and I didn't want it to just lay not just straight where it naturally would. I kind of wanted it to tip to the side like that. So you can just tack them down where you want them to be. Okay, and the troubleshooting things on the end. Well, first I want to talk about how to get one that looks like this with uneven edges or like that leaf. It works the same way, but when you are pulling it, normally you would pull snug next to your pins. As you go back and forth and weave, you would go snug next to your pins all the way down. With this one, instead of going snug next to your pins, you have one time you go snug next to your pins, the next time you leave a little bit of a loop, and then a little bit bigger loop, and then back in again, so that you get that in and out uneven edge, which looks a little bit like the ruffles on the edge of a daylily. So this one has also been tacked down where I want it, and it's not flat. It's the same way on the quilt itself. I did not do any of the tacking of any of these until after I got it back from my quilter. So let's see if I can get it in this way. My original intention was to leave all of these flappy, but when I got it back, it doesn't lay nice, and so I went ahead and tacked those down all the way along. The same thing. Now my quilt gets a lot of wear and tear traveling to and from shows. So initially, you can tell that it's been flattened. Initially, when I finished these, I could just hold them up like this, and they stayed, and that's why I tacked them that way, so that they looked like lilies. Right now they look like lilies that get smashed in a quilt box over and over again. Let's see, other things that you need to know. How to change thread if you already have if you run out of thread in the middle of a picot. If you run out of thread in the middle of a picot, all right, let's see if I have a sample of that one. We'll look at the back sides of these and see if I have one here. Because most of these picots took about 1.25 yards, and I had all of my thread cut in 1 yard pieces. Okay, here's one right here. So as I was weaving this one, I ran out of thread about right here. When I'm doing it, I'm gonna pretend with this needle for a minute. Where's this one? That I'm weaving. Let's see, will that work? Yep. I'm weaving back and forth. I go under, over, under, over. Before you get to the end of the thread, I take this right down through the back and just pull it out like that, okay? Don't put a knot in it, just pull it out just like that. And then you'll take your next thread. Let's see if we can find another thread on a needle that's ready to go. And start in about the same place. Now be careful not to go through your threads, because if you shred them, it will make it harder in the end. So somewhere near it, you come back out with your next thread. Now this one also does not have a knot in it, and leave yourself a couple of inches, okay? And then go ahead and keep weaving over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And then when you're taking it off, you'll have pulled your pins out by then. So first you'll pull your pins out, and then as you pull up your flap, you'll pull it up gently so that you can pull those, so you don't pull those threads out. Pull it up really gently. And now on the back of your woven picot, wow, that one was really long. Oops. Okay. Oh. Okay, let's pretend for a minute. Okay, so I have 2 threads, and we'll pretend that they're on the back of here. 2 threads that are just poking out from the back. Where's that one that I did? Right here. Now, take those 2 threads, and you can, on one of these, I tied them in a knot first. This one right here. I tied them in a knot first, but I found that it's easier to not tie them in the knot, because that leaves a lump. But just go ahead and thread them back down through. I use a tapestry needle for this part. Just thread them back down through. Put one through this row and one through this row, and they'll stay in place and form a nice edge. So you can start and stop your thread in the middle. Oh, do we reuse these? Absolutely. You could do a new one if you want, but I didn't give you that many. I reuse them. I know I tore the pins out, but then I know the next time where the pins go in and out, and I reuse them until my papers are starting to shred and the pins won't stay where they're supposed to. So I think I did 1.5 flowers or so each time with the same little woven picot guide. So you have 6 or 8 of them. I can't remember how many's on there, but you may need to trace more of them. So before you use the last one, you know, make a copy of it, or just make a copy of the whole sheet. And you can trace them. That's what I usually do. I don't make these pretty ones until I'm making the pattern for you. I have my little rough edges ones that I use all the time. Okay, last thing is how to get rid of those little loops that are on the end. This project right here has been finished, so it's not going to work exactly like that, but when I have a loop on the end of it, the place that I find to fix the loop is on the back side right here. That loop is the line that comes down the middle of your woven picot. So if you now hold it carefully, you can see how I'm holding the whole thing because I don't want to pull it too much. If you gently, I've got the back end of a needle on that one. If you gently tug on that, you'll be able to collapse that little loop. Now, if this project wasn't finished, I would then go to the back side and try and pull that loop under. But if this is going to lay down and be tucked down like all of these are, then you don't even need to worry about that. No one will find that little loop underneath there. But that is how I get rid of those little loops that are on the end when they show up. Okay, that is a more advanced study of woven picots.